Good Friday, everyone out there in SADS Nation. Great to get to be with you on this last Friday of May 2024, May 31st. Welcome to SADS Live, episode number 143. I'm Mike Ackerman, genetic cardiologist at the Mayo Clinic and director of Mayo Clinic's Winland Smith Rice Genetic Heart Rhythm Clinic and the Winland Smith Rice Sudden Death Genomics Laboratory. But as we always do, we come on behalf of the SADS Foundation and my CEO, Alice Laura, your CEO of our largest nonprofit advocacy organization in the world, devoted to you, to families with SADS conditions, whether yours is long QT syndrome, CPVT, Brugada syndrome, ARVC, ACM, short QT syndrome, Timothy syndrome, whatever is the lesion where you have found this to be your home. It's great to have you with us these last 4 years in this way. It's an exciting day as we close out May. And for May, this is the last day of Gene Therapy Month. And in good fashion, we have a program, the next 35 minutes devoted to your questions about gene therapy. And in a little bit, I'll be bringing on a dear friend of mine, former trainee of mine, and pediatric cardiologist, genetic cardiologist, who's just doing a fantastic job in his career at Duke University. That is Dr. Andrew Landstrom, but not quite yet. So Aaron's getting it ready, but not yet, because also exciting for us is in 11 days, the day, June 11th, the ELPFDD, the externally led patient-focused drug development program for the morning devoted to long QT syndrome and your voices, the afternoon CPVT and your voices, so that the FDA can hopefully hear loud and clear that we're not there yet, that the status quo is not acceptable yet, that there's work to be done, there's discoveries to be made, there's new advances that need to happen so that we can do a better job of preventing long QT and CPVT tragedies. And we do a better job of on therapy when the risk of tragedy is super low. But can we make quality of life even better? And I hope to hear from everyone that the answer is yes and yes. That's June 11th. You can still give to that effort. You were amazing. We raised the anonymous match of over $50,000 match gift from a generous benefactor to the SADS Foundation. And but you can still give more if you want. www.sads.org. Tomorrow, we start National CPR Awareness Week, declared National CPR Awareness Week, the first week of June, and culminating on my birthday. So let's get the awareness out. We've done an incredible job with that. CPR is the law of some states for high school graduation requirement. CPR Awareness Week starting tomorrow. An exciting announcement. We just learned, and we is Rachel Lampert, Charlene Day, and myself, the three PIs of Live Long QT Syndrome. Many of you long QT families enrolled in that prospective NIH-funded study. It just got accepted at literally minutes ago. We got the notice from Circulation. So at long last, that manuscript that describes the experience for families, individuals with long QT syndrome is now accepted by Circulation, where we showed that those who exercise the most compared to those who exercise the least, there was no demonstrable difference in long QT triggered events. That's something that we've known at Mayo Clinic for decades, and that's why we have 600 athletes with long QT syndrome under my watch doing their sport of choice, from little league to professional ranks and even Olympians. So this is a great day for the long QT community and SADS Nation in that respect. But now, the next 35 minutes is yours to have us unpack the state of gene therapy for the genetic heart diseases represented by you, our families with one of these SADS condition. And there's no one better that I would want to converse with about this than a dear friend and former trainee, Dr. Andrew Landstrom, and fellow board member of the SADS Foundation. So Aaron, let's bring on Dr. Landstrom. And here's Andrew. Welcome back to SADS Live. It's not your first. You are a repeat guest.
Oh, happy to be here.
And great to have you. And those who've been following our SADS webinars, you've done webinars for the SADS community to do an educational detail of gene therapy and the state of it. And we're going to get to that. But in case there are members out there who don't know Dr. Landstrom, give them the thumbnail journey of your journey so far.
Well, thanks, Mike. And hi to everyone who's out there. And Mike, congratulations on a wonderful publication. That Live Long QT is an amazing, groundbreaking study. And it's wonderful. That's going to see the public sphere in just a little bit. Congratulations.
Thanks.
So I first got to know cardiovascular genetics as a student with Mike Ackerman, with you, Mike. And I'm not going to date us both by saying when exactly that was, but not so long ago. I was an MD PhD student at Mayo Clinic, and I learned on the medical school side how to be a physician there. And on the PhD side, I learned how to be a physician scientist by Mike. I, at the time, was very interested in cardiovascular genetics, and that interest has grown tremendously based upon the work that I did as a graduate student. Mike put the tools of success in my hands, and I really kind of ran with it and have loved every minute of pursuing that field and that career goal. I went from Mayo Clinic to Houston, Texas, where I did a residency fellowship in pediatrics and pediatric cardiology, and a subspecialty year in arrhythmias in pediatric EP. At the same time, also got to work with a really amazing scientist out there, Xander Werens, who I actually first met through Mike, who specializes in sort of how cardiovascular disease manifests in lots of different ways, whether it's the cardiac myocyte or the heart itself. And then from there, had a chance to come home. And home from my family and I is North Carolina. I met my wife a few miles down the road at another university, not Duke, with a different shade of blue, with a different basketball team. But we've always wanted the chance to come back, and we got that chance in about 2018. We've been here ever since. We have two boys that have lived in Minnesota, lived in Texas, and now call North Carolina their home. And it's great to be here and great to join you today, Mike.
Great. And Carter and Sawyer, born in Rochester, Minnesota. Right. So deep roots that pass, and part of Mayo, always part of Mayo. And I might have mentioned an NIH-funded study that just came out in circulation minutes ago, but Andrew did not mention that he just recently received another NIH grant. So congratulations.
Thank you.
On that. And maybe we'll have time about your program and what's exciting you the most, but what's exciting everybody right now is gene therapy. Obviously, there's a lot of attention about it. There's probably a lot of confusion out there as to when it will happen. Why is it taking so long? But for SADS Nation to know, this is year 24 for me on staff. The first 21 years, I don't think I ever mentioned gene therapy to any patient. It was a distant dream, maybe one that we thought was going to be a bridge too far. Is it actually going to happen? Now, in the last 3 years, we're not only mentioning the promise or the possibility of gene therapy to our patients, we're actually enrolling patients in real time in not just one gene therapy trial, one for MYBPC3 HCM, another for PKP2 ARVC, and there's literally trial after trial that's either in the queue or is now in patient enrollment phase. And it's a phase, Andrew, that's you're early in your career, just year 7 or 8, but now for half of your career, you're actually talking about gene therapy with your patients. It's an incredible time, isn't it?
It really is. The pace of sort of gene therapy advancement out of sort of the wet bench into the clinical trial setting has been really tremendously fast. And I totally agree. I think it is an exciting time. And like you said, Mike, it's a confusing time because the pace of this advancement has been so rapid and on so many different fronts. It's hard for me to keep track of it. And I know it's hard for SADS families to do so as well.
And when we think of gene therapy, just so that we put a expectation set, even with these clinical trials that are actually enrolling patients today, let's assume that those are perfect. Safety endpoints, which is the initial trials, later an efficacy endpoint trial. Let's say every endpoint is met and we're in the queue for an FDA-approved gene therapy for one of our SADS conditions. Put that in perspective for our patients that if we go perfect, no hiccups, that FDA-approved gene therapy for one of our patient populations is circa January 2025 or no?
No, it's a good question. And oftentimes this is the first question that patients ask me and their parents ask me is like, when can we expect this for our family? And I think it's important to kind of take a step back a little bit and to say, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and frankly, the medical community has as its priority safety. And that priority cannot be sacrificed. That means we have to take time to do this. And the FDA has laid out a pathway for drug approval. And it's similar for gene therapies as it is for other types of therapy. But that pathway, while long, is centered around safety. And there are multiple different stages to this pathway that get progressively more and more involved. But safety is front of mind. And because of that, it does take some time. And so I think your kind of approximation of 2025, kind of if that's where we are, heading into the next year or so, potentially 5 to 10 years after that is sort of a window when you might expect these to start to creep out of the clinical trial phase if everything goes very, very well. I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be much shorter than that, but I also wouldn't suspect that's going to be terribly long because there's so many things in that preclinical pipeline, that early FDA pipeline. I think 5 to 10 years we'll start to see some things for some SADS conditions kind of reach prime time, as it were.
And so I think that's the thing, the healthy reality check, isn't it, that they need to have is, yes, we're talking about it, but that doesn't mean it's around the corner as defined by next year you and I are going to be prescribing gene therapy for our patient. I'm hopeful that we're right, that 5 to 10 years we will be prescribing gene therapy. We'll be administering it in the hospital, infusing our patient with it. And that would be in the 5 to 10 year mark. But anyone who's thinking it's going to be sooner than that, you're set up for disappointment because you're like, what's taking so long? And nothing's taking so long. That's the deliberate, methodical pace that has to be undertaken for us to make sure we have satisfied safety, and then efficacy. Does it actually work? Because it will not be an inexpensive therapy, will it?
No, I mean, I think if you look at the gene therapies that have been approved, they're tens of millions of dollars, typically per infusion. So they're going to be quite expensive.
And I think that's part of, don't you think, the June 11 externally led patient-focused drug development, that the therapy sector world, the industry, they're going to be listening and paying attention, because if our long QT CPVT families aren't declaring dissatisfaction with current therapy, and if there's not a perception of unmet need, well, then there's zero reason to embark on development of new therapies that are not going to be inexpensive.
No, I agree. I think this is where patient and family voices are going to be central. There is a huge cost, especially early on with these new investigational therapies. And one way to show value beyond a dollar amount is to have those open conversations about how the SADS conditions that affect you, affect your families, you can't put a price tag on those types of things. Quality of life, what it means to live with your SADS condition, what it means to, as a family, have to kind of walk through that journey together. Those kinds of really important stories are things that oftentimes are not brought out in this conversation and are tremendously important for the people who make those determinations about whether to proceed with trials, gene therapy. Really important that they hear those things, because I think those things counterbalance some of the cost arguments that people tend to make with these kinds of conditions.
That's great. Often we're asked, aren't we, will this gene therapy be a cure? And could you discuss that a little bit? For example, the clinical trial where your and my patients might be exploring for PKP2 gene therapy, is that a curative trial if it works? Or when and how do we call a therapy a cure?
Yeah. I think that's a challenging question to answer, because it depends on what you mean with cure. I think if you were saying, well, gosh, I would like a therapy where my heart, maybe I've had some signs of arrhythmic cardiomyopathy develop, maybe some of that fibrofatty infiltrate, maybe some of the arrhythmias, I've got the ICD, and that's why I'm taking part in that phase 1 trial. A cure for me means I'm off my medications, my heart goes back to normal, and the ICD can come out. I think that's a very tall order, and just something we just don't know if that's going to happen or not. If you look at the scientific work that went into that clinical trial, there was some evidence that the progression of disease can be halted. This is predominantly in the mouse work. Some evidence, perhaps, that some of the remodeling kind of did recover over time. The heart squeeze came back and the arrhythmias went away. So by those potential preclinical studies, you could say, well, gosh, we're getting back a lot of the things we thought we had lost with arrhythmic cardiomyopathy. However, mice and people are different, and mice don't read the same textbooks that people do. And so it's really, really hard to know for sure whether all those same things are going to be directly seen in those early stage clinical trials. That's really hard to know how much or how little that gene therapy is going to ameliorate all of those things. Certainly the gene therapy early trials are designed to look at early changes, early benefit, to make sure that there is that efficacy along with the safety profile. So it may take some time, more time, for those trials to really clearly articulate how much or how little the benefit is. And my hope certainly is that there is something akin to a cure, one where medications can be lessened and people get back to living sort of a SADS-free life. We have to wait and see what the trials show and how those gene therapies do, but that's certainly my hope.
And I'm one of those pioneer patients, let's say I am, who raises their hand and says, I see I'm study eligible for that gene therapy trial for condition X, Y, or Z. When I'm raising my hand and participating, do I get to expect in that phase 1 trial that therapy is going to actually work? Should I be expecting efficacy out of that trial, or are these first trials something different, again, to make sure that the patient is properly calibrated when he or she says, yeah, I'll do that?
Yeah. No, and this is if when is gene therapy happening going to be the first question. The second question is, what can I expect from that early phase clinical trial? So if we stay on our topic of arrhythmic cardiomyopathy and the PKP2 trials that are currently underway, like we mentioned, it's an early phase trial, and those phase 1 clinical trials are designed specifically for safety. And so that's what all the attention from the clinical trials team to you is going to be focused on. And so you can expect, not necessarily, looking for things that are different about your SADS disease, but a lot of attention given to how are you feeling, new symptoms, how is your heart doing from a safety perspective. Organs that you may not think of as being SADS affected organs might still be affected by the gene therapy. So a lot of attention on things like the liver, for example, and the blood counts are going to be very important, how the kidneys are doing with those gene therapies. So lots of attention on safety. And then whether the therapy actually works is actually secondary to that question of safety. And so if I was a a pioneer patient looking to take part in these early studies, I would be calibrated to think success from that early phase study for me is going to be, I get a gene therapy and it's safe for me. And being safe for me means that the door might be opened for other people down the road for additional trials. I would think of, is my SADS condition getting better being a secondary sort of goal for that. It would be more of an altruistic, like I really want this to be a safe option for others that come after me. And so I'm going to be one of those pioneering folks that takes that on.
And I think that's a little different, isn't it, than all of those cancer trials where the phase 1 trial is purely safety and no guarantee that it's going to change the outcome of their usually dismal state of their metastatic cancer, where they know they're going to die, but they want to make a difference for the future. And so they see that their window is short. Our scenario is much more difficult, don't you think? Because our patients are very much alive and we expect them to stay alive. And now they're considering doing a therapy that we don't know is going to work. It's not designed to prove that it works, but they're willing to say, I want to blaze the trail for the future because I'm not content with the current treatment configuration. Yes, I'm alive, but I don't want this journey to be the journey for my grandson, my granddaughter, and so forth. So I'm willing to do a safety trial because I want to make a difference. So I find our families even braver, honestly, than the oncology world, because when they do their phase 1 trials, they're not anticipating staying alive. So I think our families are incredible from that perspective. Have you thought about it in that comparison and contrast? It also makes it difficult because oftentimes our families are hoping that they get to see an efficacy signal.
Right.
And then if they don't, they're like, well, why did I do that? So again, making sure people are knowing what they're signing up for and the why is really important. Have you seen that kind of, because the families who are willing to say yes to it, to me, they are the real heroes in this, because it's very different than the cancer world of phase 1 trials.
I couldn't agree more. I think, for SADS conditions, especially, and, we're talking about arrhythmic cardiomyopathy, you could extend this to other SADS conditions like long QT as one example, where actually most are doing really well. If you're being trained, if you're being followed by a person who specializes in long QT and SADS conditions, they're doing really well. And so oftentimes those questions that they get are really hard. And the families are incredibly brave and very thoughtful in how they approach this. And, I try to give them this conversation in clinic as best we can. And sometimes, they think about that and they say, what's the goal for me and for my family? And maybe it's not right for us to take part in the phase 1 trial. We'll kind of see how this goes for us. And because things are going really well, there's also complexity with taking part in the phase 1 trial for gene therapy. There's logistical complexity, like having to get up sometimes and move and go somewhere where these trials are being held. And so they're very thoughtful about this. And oftentimes are making that determination, what's right for me and my family. And the ones who say, gosh, this might be something where we have said this is a goal for us to advance the science, to do this not just for us and for our family, but for the entire SADS community. Those are truly special people indeed, and very, very brave to do so.
And those who are then coming, and we're a trial site for one of the PKP2 gene therapy trials and also for the MYBPC3 hypertrophic cardiomyopathy trial, they're wondering, why are they getting some of this pre-treatment stuff, this immune system suppression drugs? And is that just for this phase 1 trial, or is this going to be part of the package deal if gene therapy were to be proven to be successful and efficacious? And if it is part of the package deal, why do they need that immune system medicines anyway?
No, and I think it's good to kind of take a step back again and say, well, what is this gene therapy and how is it getting into the heart? There are very few things that you can infuse in the body that go inside your heart cells. The heart cells are designed to be protected from all the influences of the outside world. for obvious reasons. You want your heart to work and not be impacted by things out in the environment. And so many of these gene therapy trials are using a tool to infuse that therapy, that gene therapy, into the heart cells. And things that exist that are really, really good at injecting things into your cells are actually viruses. And many of these gene therapy trials, especially for heart conditions, are using very specific kinds of viruses that want to go to the heart. Those viruses have stripped out of them a lot of the things that make viruses, that make people sick when they get those viruses. And those things can be things that cause the virus to replicate over time and cause you to get ill. But while the virus may not make you sick because they've been stripped out, you've got this wonderful immune system that is designed to find those viruses and to induce an immune response to fight off those viruses. And oftentimes, it's this immune response to the virus that can cause problems. This is one of the reasons why they'll probably check your liver, because oftentimes individuals who get this immune response can get this immune response in the liver. That happens to be where the blood goes after things have been infused into your venous circulation, right to your liver. And so the immune response in the liver can cause problems. And if you look at some of the very tragic, unfortunate deaths that have occurred in other gene therapy trials, not for the heart, but for other rare diseases, those deaths have oftentimes been linked with that immune response in the liver. And sometimes this can be really quite late, meaning months and maybe even years down the road after the therapy was given, this immune response can be quite severe. There's not a lot of ways that this can be predicted to happen. Like you can't say, well, am I high risk or low risk for this happening? And so it's become very, very common for gene therapy to be accompanied by medications that can suppress the immune system. The idea being that if you get these immune suppressants early, then the body's ability to fight off the virus will be diminished, and that might suppress some of these late or early or late immune responses that can be potentially life-threatening. And so I would submit that probably these are going to have to be considered anytime gene therapy is in the mix, when that gene therapy is using a virus. And I would say for the majority of the SADS conditions, it's probably something that will need to be talked about for that gene therapy to be successful and safe.
And if I'm the patient and I tried to enroll in the phase 1 safety trial, but then I was told that it looks like I can't get that gene therapy because I have some sort of antibody reaction that doesn't let me receive the gene therapy. What's that all about? Is that tied into the same immune system thing? Because I kind of thought that if the gene therapy comes available and works, everybody gets to get it. But maybe that's not the case, huh?
No, unfortunately, it's not. And it oftentimes has to do with the viruses that we get just as kids or as young adults. A lot of these viruses that are being used to give gene therapy, to deliver them to the heart cells, are based around a certain class, a certain type of virus, an adeno-associated virus. And oftentimes, just like any other virus, people can get adeno-associated virus or viruses that are very similar to it in their past. You may not know about it because you may have just got a cold or maybe even a fever, or maybe even never even knew you had it. But yet your immune system knows you had that virus. And the immune system is very good at remembering when you get that virus again. And so if you had it once, your body says, my goodness, I'm going to make antibodies against that virus so that if you get it again, I am prepared to fight that virus off. And so that's what they're testing for when you do that early blood work to see whether you've had maybe some antibodies against the virus. Because if you have, then odds are good that that immune system is going to respond to the gene therapy virus just as if it had responded to a naturally occurring virus, and the risk of having that immune response goes up. And unfortunately, that immune response will be there potentially for the rest of your life. Now, there is some science going into, can we make viruses where it's highly unlikely that the immune system of most humans has ever seen that virus. Really amazing science being done in viruses that tend to affect, very sort of exotic animals. But until those viruses are being used routinely for gene therapy, unfortunately for those individuals, their immune system will remember, and it'll be something that will be a barrier for them to get gene therapy.
And that's right now, right, with when the therapy, the gene therapy, which is being delivered, that's the therapeutic cargo, and it has to have a delivery mechanism. That delivery mechanism is this stripped out adenovirus copycat, like you said. But what if we come up with different ways to deliver the gene therapy of interest that doesn't have any of this immune system thing, and AAV as the deliverer, and it's delivered by, FedEx instead of UPS as the deliverer. So there's some work going on to have non-virus delivery strategies, isn't there?
There are, and these are particularly exciting. So can you use little fatty envelopes? For your FedEx analogy, these fatty envelopes would be like a different kind of package for that virus to go directly into your cells. There are different ways to give gene therapies that don't require viruses at all, or don't even require these sort of fatty envelopes. In theory, you can use some types of gene therapy just by injecting those therapies without a delivery mechanism into the heart cells. So there are lots of different ways down the road potentially that might allow for the immune system to be kind of a little bit less of a player, because the immune system will not necessarily attack those things. But it's something that's on the horizon, I believe.
Right. But right now, as of summer 2024, every clinical trial that involves gene therapy to the heart is using a stripped out virus as the delivery system.
Correct.
Yeah. So that immune system and the blunting the immune system is part of the package deal. Well, I'm often asked this, and maybe you have heard it too, that, well, at least if I can't expect efficacy out of the phase 1 trial, and I'm doing it for the future safety, and I want to make future therapies different, at least if I get this gene therapy, I won't be able to pass on my mutation to my child. So that's why I'll do it. That's not quite right, though, is it?
Unfortunately, no. So actually, it's a really important thing to clarify, because the goal of gene therapy is to fix the disease where the disease lives, and that's in the heart. In addition, the approaches for these gene therapies are not to change the DNA, not to actually change and fix the mutation. It's been to kind of replace the mutation with a normal copy of the gene. At least that's the current gene therapy for SADS diseases. And so there is no change to the actual DNA that caused the SADS condition to begin with. Moreover, there's no change to the cells, like the egg or the sperm cells, that allow you to pass that SADS condition on to your biological children. So even if, best case scenario for gene therapy, it's a cure and your heart goes back to being normal, it is still possible, at least right now with the therapies that are in the pipeline, to pass the SADS condition that you have down to your biological children.
And so that is not changed at all for everyone out there. So one, to be eligible for any of these gene therapy trials, you have to have the disease gene. To have the disease gene, that means, in general terms, half of your eggs possess it if you are female, half of your sperm own that mutation if you are a male, and that is not changed at all. So even if you do this phase 1 trial, each child that you create in your future still has a 50-50 chance of inheriting your disease causative gene. So that isn't the bonus benefit, as Dr. Landstrom pointed out. Nora is joining us, and maybe we'll have to change SADS Nation to SADS World, because we have families all over the world. So I use SADS Nation in the macro global sense, because Nora is from Europe, I believe, and she's wondering, will it be available in Europe? And as of now, I think all of the gene therapy trials that are in motion in our SADS conditions are being executed in the United States. Or are there others that are at least in motion in elsewhere? I'm not aware of those.
I'm not aware of any outside of the United States either.
But often these companies start in the United States with the trials. But for sure, if they meet safety and efficacy endpoints and they pass through phase 1, 2, and 3 and get FDA approved, then those companies begin their submission process to obtain the appropriate and necessary approvals in those various countries throughout the world. And so if this therapy works, it will be available to our SADS patients worldwide. Of course, there's other issues, right? Access to care may not be available for our SADS families in third world countries where we're already having a hard time just getting them their beta blocker and things like that. So that this does not change that. We have 5 minutes on the counter, Andrew, and are there other myths that you would like to take these 5 minutes to debunk, or key questions that have bubbled up through your practice that you think would be great to sort of level set so everybody is aware of what they should and should not expect out of these next 5 years?
Yeah, I would just say if you have questions about any of this, use trusted sources. So I have a lot of families who say, I have Googled something and oh my goodness, at what I saw on the internet. So I guess the piece of advice would be if you have questions, go to trusted sources. The SADS Foundation is an absolute trusted source. The SADS Foundation has tremendous materials to help kind of calibrate your thinking a little bit. Might have a way to kind of reach out and get some more information through reaching SADS experts. But I would say go to trusted sources if you have those questions. And also realize too that if you're very interested in one of these early phase 1 clinical trials, that they can be logistically challenging. So some families think, well, I can just sign up and I can get my gene therapy here in clinic with you, Dr. Landstrom, and then go home. And that's not really the case. It's a big investment in time and in family commitment to go to a center and to have the infusions done, all that testing done. And so if that's something that you're interested in, certainly ask about it. Try to get more information and use those trusted resources when you do.
Thanks, Dr. Landstrom. And hopefully for SADS Nation, you have found that the SADS Foundation is indeed that trusted resource that you have experienced. And we're certainly trying at SADS Foundation to make that very available to you on the internet at www.sads.org. So you can see what clinical trials for SADS conditions have been launched. What are the baseline eligibility criteria? So you might know at a glance whether you may or may not even meet criteria to be considered. To make it easy, not a secret, for you to know what numbers you can contact if you want to seek further information. And we are revamping the website, so to speak, to sort of make that information easily retrievable for you, so you're not feeling like you have to do your own Google-based homework to find it. We want to make that information very accessible to you. So let us know what you need for us to do that even better. Well, Andrew, I'm very grateful for you. I know you've heard it before many times, but I can gladly say it many, many times more, and I will. So proud of you. So excited for you, your wife, your family, your career. You just make this aging and mentor feel very, very good about the state of genetic cardiology for the next generations to come. So appreciate you. Thanks for joining us. And for all of you out there at SADS Foundation who are part of our family, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing this and spreading the word across the various social media platforms. You have a few weeks off now. We are now getting together again in 3 weeks from today, Friday, June 21st for SADS 144. So I will miss you. So until then, have a wonderful end of May today and a first 3 weeks of June. And I look forward to being back with you on June 21st. Until then, be well, everyone. Be part of June 11th. Be thinking about June 11th. Externally led, patient-focused drug development day for long QT and CPVT. My view, prediction, will be a defining moment for our families with long QT and CPVT. It'll be an inflection point in history, to be sure. So thanks for all your support for that. Be thinking about that it is beyond our dreams successful, and that your voices are heard loud and clear by the FDA, that we are not there yet. We still have work to do, and it's time for all of us to continue to do that work. Blessings, everyone.